Boom to the hey, all you sports fans out there in the Tubosphere. Welcome to the One Man Sports Rant, Gen 2.0. I am your host, Will, the alternative ESPN. Sports Thrill, doing week 2 review of college football. You see our Pi Kappa Alpha, House Sweethearts. You heard from Dead or Alive, Brand New Lovers. What is Gen 2.0 of the OMSR? Just briefly, lots of Olympic shows to go into more detail. It's not 15 minutes of me flapping my gums, but it's not a 15-minute sports highlight reel either. It's the best of both. So, the show is copyrighted to OMSR. Brief video highlights courtesy to ESPN. OMSR does not own these video highlights, but does own all the other original content and the overall concept herein, thereof, therefore, most rights reserved. We also adhere to the strict interpretation standard of the DCMA, Digital Copyright Act. These tenets were hashed out through WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, and these are derivatives, fair use standard, minimal use. You could also say no money exchange hands, because the OMSR is a pro bono production. Alright, so just briefly today, before I get to the Life Rant Sports Rant of the day, I always let you know the highlights coming up so you know what you get. Get a little bit longer highlight reel within the context of a show, so that's good. Try to keep the talk short, sweet, in soundbite form via the highlights. Alright, so today we have... So now we're talking part 4, finally, the final part. Sorry about the abrupt cutoff from before, but I had to cut myself short and decided to keep that as the baseline for all of the parts and then do each, individual show there from, pursuant to the video highlights. So the clips coming up are College Game Day Final, their breakdown on the newbies to the SEC, and then a much more detailed analysis on why and how of UCLA, and then Michigan Air Force, and then Arizona, Oklahoma State. Okay, so on the final Life Rant, Sports Rant of the show in part 4, I'd have to say to Steve Sarkisian, we didn't show any highlights from LSU Washington, you noticed. Taking a Tiger up to Husky Stadium, sort of a, oxymoronic or just weird. Let's just call it weird. Didn't seem to do a whole heck of a lot of good. Maybe he should have reacted emotionally the very next day after the Alamo Bowl and fired his entire defensive staff. Now, as I alluded to on part 3 of this series and back in week 1, these coaching changes. How do you judge good coaches? Well, unless they've been there for a full cycle, players that were there before them have moved on and graduated. That takes 5 to 6 years. Really hard to judge how they're doing. And then maybe another 3 to 4 years to see how well they've recruited. So it takes like 6 to 8 years. Washington's defense of 2 years ago, a bunch of those dudes went to the NFL. Even though their record didn't really reflect it. But they did beat Nebraska in the bowl game. And they beat Nebraska at the beginning of last year. So they were hanging with Baylor tough. You're just dealing with RG3, Heisman Trophy winner. And it was, the final score was close enough, in the 50s. The LSU game being blanked 40-3, and the only reason you got that 3 was because of a goof on LSU's part, would be the sort of situation you get rid of your entire defensive staff. Not from the Alamo Bowl. He had a good enough record to get to a mid to high level bowl. He just shouldn't have done that, and they're paying the price now. Their defense does not look improved at all. I'm sure he's regretted. All right, that's a 2-minute warning. Running out of time. So, from Generation 1, we always go back to the musical lead-into Dead or Alive, Brand New Lover. Also, thanks for watching. No silly DUIs while you're out there. And from Gen 2.0, later days and more college football plays.
It made the crack here in the off-season asking Booster Club, have you ever been to College Station? You'll only go once. So he took a lot of heat this week, and his team was able to back it up for him. Texas A&M last year, I know it's an entirely new situation, but 4 of their 6 losses, they squandered double-digit leads in the second half. Now, they got shut out in the second half. What was the big difference in your judgment in the Florida defense from the first half to the second?
Well, I think Florida defense gave up 269 yards the first half, gave up only 64 the second half, and the biggest difference was they kept Manziel from getting outside. Notice here in the first half how he starts up, the end gets caught inside, he breaks it out, linebacker runs underneath it, Manziel goes in untouched for the touchdown. That was the first half, 269 yards. Second half, they held A&M to 64. What's the difference? Same play. The end's going to step inside momentarily. bounces back out. But watch what happens. Now here comes the strong safety. Here comes the court. He isn't going to get outside. They felt a guy 5'11" would not beat him up inside. And I feel also that, as you can see the stats that say that, Jeff Driscoll did a great job. He got sacked too often, threw very accurately, and handled the game well.
How about that Florida defense? 4 3-and-outs in the second half. They gave up only one play of 10 or more yards. A&M unable to score as we go next level with the stats. And Florida certainly went next level in answering the bell, because for the first half of the game, A&M looked like the tougher, more aggressive football team, and then Florida was able to regain control. A very similar scenario really in the Georgia-Missouri game, as Georgia outscored Missouri 32-10 in the second half. Who are the difference makers? Who was an impact performer in that game to you?
I think it was quarterback Aaron Murray, his decision-making with the football. He's the Pied Piper. He's the guy that's been around the block for Georgia. He's traveled down the road, won a lot of big games. They needed his leadership in this football game, particularly in the second half. What I really like here is getting rid of the ball in a hurry, getting it out of your hands, making a quick decision with the ball. On this play, he's going to put the ball only where his receiver can get it and the defender can't. And it's 2 steps, drop, turn around, and fire the ball and get it out of your hands so the defense cannot react. Terrific job by the offense and Aaron Murray. Everybody's on the same page. That's what I liked about his decision-making. That's why Georgia, in the second half, found a way to win, because they had a great leader under the center.
Is it a coincidence or indicative of the adjustment that Missouri and Texas A&M will have to make long-term, the way that both of those teams in the second half, not nearly as strong as they were in the first half, but got worn down?
They did get worn down. I think when you look at both of these teams, Florida and Georgia, they're used to 4 quarters of being knocked around, being beaten around by the best athletes in college football in the SEC, going the distance for 4 quarters. I think when you look at Texas A&M, you look at Missouri, they came out fired up, excited, enthusiasm in the first half. They just couldn't contain it for 4 quarters. And if you look at the defense, particularly for Georgia and Florida, they just wore down the opposition in these games. And this is what's going to happen throughout the season.
When you run a spread offense, your quarterback has to be effective as a runner. We saw what they did to Manziel. Let me tell you that what they did to Franklin, he carried the ball, I think, was 20 times for a total of 25 yards. When your quarterback's not productive, and that's the main guy in your offensive system in the spread, that's a problem. I'm not sure they got wore down physically, but let me tell you, it's a long year. They have to do this over and over and over in the SEC. There's no breathers.
And you know, I would also say, to point out on the other side for both Missouri and Texas A&M, just because they didn't come through in the second half this week in their first game doesn't mean they won't somewhere down the road. I mean, certainly they proved that they fight tough. It is a long season.
But it's also different when they go on the road and they're going to find a different environment, completely new.
Yeah, that environment, those 2 environments today were spectacular, and they probably won't be duplicated simply because it's the first time. Franklin, over 200 yards rushing again, and UCLA wins at 36-30. I mean, look, they are playing with a purpose. This looks like a different team from what we've seen the last couple of years in UCLA. But what was the turning? What was the big point in this game that you felt turned it in the Bruins' favor?
I think maybe the missed field goal, but I think it was the safety. And when he's supposed to read the end, but the linebacker came in. That linebacker was supposed to tackle the tailback, but it didn't work out that way. But I tell you what, I've never seen a Nebraska team tackle as poorly as they did. Either Franklin's the greatest runner in the history of the game, or Nebraska needs to work on tackling.
All right, when you look at UCLA's resurgence, you know, the defense gave up a lot of yards for sure, but they held Nebraska to 1 of 11 on 3rd down. Offensively, boy, they've really been good in their first 2 games, particularly good against the Huskers.
And Jonathan Franklin, the running back, was terrific in this game, catching balls out of the backfield. He was absolutely phenomenal of doing something with a short pass and a long run. And that put a lot of pressure on the Nebraska defense in this game. And I think when you look at Hundley, the quarterback, it gives him a player that he can count on out of the backfield, and that's your running back. And here on this play, terrific job. They put it back in motion here, right out of the backfield. Just dump it to your back, a little swing pass. Look at his vision. There's somebody that's unblocked. He's got to beat him. He's looking down the field. He's thinking ahead. Jonathan Franklin has excellent vision here. He shakes the first one, shakes the second one, takes the ball down the sidelines. Now right here, instead of going out of bounds, he plants right there. Watch this. He's going to plant right there, and he's going to turn it back inside to pick up additional yardage for the offense. This is an outstanding play. Offensive linemen love this. Dump it off. You get big kudos for this play because you don't do a lot. The back does it all, but it's a short pass and a long run. He picks up blockers down the field. field, and I love his vision going down the field of play. Here's the little dump pass, the swing pass right here, another short pass, great run, takes it in for the score. But what really impresses me, he had 3 receptions for 59 yards and a touchdown. It's his running ability. In the first 2 games, over 200 yards against Rice, over 200 yards against the Blackshirts. He's a player that's carrying the load for UCLA.
And both those plays illustrate your point and my point. 7 missed tackles on that play. Maybe it's Franklin, I don't know.
Bigger picture here is, though, what Jim Moore has been able to do with the same components that Rick Neuheisel had last year, the same players. It's like getting twice as much gas mileage out of the same gallon of gas you put in your car. He's getting so much more out of the same players, and they're believing it. They bought in.
You know why he's getting more? Because he's running an offense that's suited to his personnel. They hired Noah Mazzoni, which is the smartest thing Jim Moore has done since he got the head coaching job. You know, they were trying to run the pure pistol. They didn't have the running quarterback, and it didn't work out for Neuheisel and his staff. This has worked out pretty well. Now, I want you to follow along with these numbers. For UCLA since 2008, when they go over 170 yards rushing, they've got an excellent record. They did that in this game against Nebraska. Now, what they haven't done well is win games when they give up a bunch of yards rushing. Nebraska had a couple of 100-yard rushers in the game, but still UCLA found a way to win it. Made them just 8 and 27 since 2008 when allowing 140 or more yards on the ground. Things did not go well for the Big Ten on the road against the Pac-12. How about at home against the Mountain West? Michigan, Brady Hoke against Air Force. First quarter, no score. Let's break out the ESPN axis because you know what's going to happen. Shoelace, who didn't have to run longer than 9 yards against Alabama, has a 79-yarder here. That's Michigan up 7-0. Third quarter up 14-10. Let's break out the axis again. And Lou, show us how Robinson uses some great blocks.
Well, what he does, he starts up there. Notice how he comes around. He cuts it back behind it. But he has vision. He can see where the defender is, where the blocker, and he's thinking downfield.
218 yards on the ground. Michigan up 21-10, but Falcons not done. Cody gets his way into the end zone. 21-17. Under 2 minutes to go. 28-17. Oh, Air Force faking the field goal, Mayday.
Oh, couldn't get it in on the fake, but I like their aggressiveness in this game, going for the win against Michigan on the road.
And Michigan would fail to take advantage of the stop, and this time gets. Oh, that is a sweet move. Nice. 28-25 after the 2-point conversion late in the fourth. Michigan up 31-25. Air Force going for it on 4th down. The pitch and the Michigan defense there to make the stop. 31-25. Wolverines. 12 after a shaky start to the weekend. Utah and Colorado losses made a statement. Oklahoma State against Arizona. Wes Lunt, the freshman, didn't throw an incomplete pass in the opener against Savannah State. Was hot early. Tracy Moore touchdown, 14-0 Pokes. But Matt Scott at 460-plus yards of offense in the opener finds Austin Hill. That drive ends up in a field goal. What about Kadeem Carey, the running back who's making noise for Rich Rod, Mayday?
And a terrific job of the offensive line, but a nice job just powering it in straight ahead. Keep chugging those feet. Chop, 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 getting in the end zone.
23 unanswered points for Bear down. Third quarter, though. Here come the Pokes. Jeremy Smith turning the corner, Lou.
Oh, well executed. They have a lot of speed at Oklahoma State.
30-28 in Oklahoma State. Thinking that perhaps getting back in it, but then the freshman is picked off by Jonathan McKnight. Pick 6 for number 6. Arizona turns this thing into a rout. A huge win for Rich Rod.